Get me? I don't think so.
Okay, where did we come from? Were we evolved by some simple being, or were we created? That is the question that we're going to be considering on how all this started, or where did we come from in that term, or could we conclude that we came from evolution or from creation? Well, it all started with a debate of what Charles Darwin wrote on the origin of species. He based everything upon another famous philosopher named Anaximander, which wrote about life came from non-life. Now, as extreme as that sounds, what that meant was that anything that didn't live, that's how it came to live. For example, particles as small as a grain of sand, what came to be as big as an elephant that we see today, but in due time. He observed a group of islands, this Charles Darwin, and what he discovered was that there were different species of birds, finches, for example. And he observed their beaks, but using this connection, he observed also that in time, ape and man had a connection of some sort. Also, we can see that scientists have used this to serve as a tool for their evidence of survival of the fittest. For example, the peppered moth. Many have believed that it changed through its variations. Before the Industrial Revolution, the peppered moth was white on these trees. But after the Industrial Revolution, it came to be darker due to the soot that fell on the trees during that time. These scientists and others have discovered that maybe this is part of what they call now microevolution, or a variation from the same species. Dogs, for example, many have breeded them so that way they can be smaller, like a Chihuahua, or big, like a pit bull dog. But many have seen their differences, and some scientists even conclude that macroevolution could be possible through all this. Dawkins even said that all of this evidence is from any serious biologist. Now, if we could see that if evolutionists such as he and other ones, they also surprise others by saying that they support this truth just as the way the earth revolves around the sun, and the water, well, has two components, oxygen and hydrogen. But we know that these are not debatable. Evolution is still debatable, even till today. But what about creation? What is involved with that? Well, creation is about man and all its creatures, and they were created in their due time by a creator, an all-divine creator. Man has their genetic code complete. We understand that under the microscope, many people have discovered that at a cellular level, with its millions of different components, and the complex understanding of it, it could be impossible that any form as little as a grain of salt can come and for billions of years later become what we see as the size of an elephant. Now, as people see the visual version of all this, they can see that the complexity of an eye or ear or any of the parts of the body, it cannot be that it just came to happen to be. Because let's say, for example, there are over 200 different types of cells on our body. Different types, not just one type, but different types, with its trillions of cells covering our whole body. Now, consider our brain, for example. Many scientists compare chimps, apes, gorillas with a man because they say, oh, they all came from some form or another from one being. But when you compare between one of those, such as a chimp, the brain, a human brain has a higher capacity. For example, chimps can't hold the same amount of information that a human can in the sense of even language. Humans have that ability to understand and form some sort of language. Chimps and apes can't. Other doubts are that evolution and scientists look for possibilities in the future. Perhaps they see that a human can be somehow a superhuman, perhaps one day. But these mutations, as they call it, are some that have failed to see what they can do in the future. For example, they tried to experiment this with the fruit fly. They tried to develop different flies, but they failed due to their mutations and these experiments. They have concluded that these mutations can't even hold together, nor can they reproduce any more for themselves. So as you can see that with these failed attempts, we understand that just as creation is, it's all complete. There are scientists that are convinced that there is a divine creator, such as Radu Pupa. He's a microbiologist, and he doesn't believe in anything that's biblical. However, he said that the complexity mechanisms that is required for the function of a cell is required for this, and so he understands that there is no way that some cell can be just appear just out of nowhere. Nowadays, people trust in science, but they also have some faith in that there is not just what they can't see or see, but they also know that there's some almighty or divine being superior to the ones here that we see. We understand that we are creatures, that we are complex, and surely with all of this evidence, we know that there's a creator that had created us, instead of being that we have been evolved much better than just from a grain of sand or from some other little creature or being, but that we are more than just that. We are a complex version of human beings. So we understand that there is some sort of architect or designer involved in that. Okay. Now, are there any questions? Yes.
What is the origin of species?
On the origin of species, it's a book that, what happened was Charles Darwin, he composed a lot of writings. One in which he was on a group of islands where he observed these finches. But not only that, but he observed this philosopher that he was like trying to figure out the way he thought from non-living creatures to what is living nowadays. Say, for example, bacteria, he observed that. He also observed birds, animals, giant tortoises, all those creatures. In his book, he finally published it many years after he first started it in the 1800s. Yes?
What were the group of islands that he observed?
Well, there were the Galapagos Islands. They're off the coast of Ecuador, in South America. There he discovered that's where he mainly sailed. He sailed around the world, Charles Darwin, and he found this group of islands, and even the other scientists tried to mimic what he had done, and they found many creatures on there. And today there are other creatures that are still on there. And on one particular island, in fact, they figured that there are many little animals and creatures and things like that, but they found out that there are more species on that island than they thought that there were. But that's an interesting group of islands that they found. Yes.
What is the fruit fly experiment?
Oh, the fruit fly experiment. Well, scientists have always tried to replicate mutations. They always want to replicate everything. It has to do with microbiology. And so one of the experiments was the fruit fly. Now, we understand that breeders breed dogs because they're just from the same species. There's nothing different about that. But what they try to do is they try to create new flies by zapping them with microwaves and radiation. And they did all sorts of things to them to try to figure out how they can crossbreed fruit flies. But through that, they failed to attempt to make a new, to evolve them into something superior. So instead, they created some mutated flies without wings, and some that were even blind. Okay.